The December 14th Planning and Transportation Commission, and would you please call the roll?
Yes. Chair Lowy,
Present.
Vice Chair Suma,
Present.
Commissioner Chang,
Here.
Commissioner Heckman,
Here.
Commissioner Rekdal,
Here.
Commissioner Rupavar,
Present.
Commissioner Templeton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All commissioners present, one online. And now we'd like to read the resolution relative to call-in comments from the public. Amy French.
Yes. Good evening, Amy French, Chief Planning Official. Pursuant to AB 361, this meeting will be held.
Closer to the mic.
Amy French, Chief Planning Official. Pursuant to AB 361, this meeting will be held with the option to attend by teleconference or in person. Members of the public may provide live public comment by submitting a speaker card prior to the start of the public comment on that item. Speakers may address items that are not on the agenda during the oral communications portion of the meeting. Spoken comments via a computer or smartphone will be accepted through the Zoom app. To address the commission, go to zoom.us/join. The meeting ID is 916-4155-9499. When you wish to speak, click on Raise Hand. To offer comments using a regular phone, call 1-669-900-6833 and enter the meeting ID 916-4155-9499. When you wish to speak on an item, hit *9 on your phone so we will know that you wish to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any agenda changes, additions, or deletions? Okay, seeing
No
none.
changes.
Seeing none from staff or commissioners, let's go to the city official reports. Ms. Chang. Sorry. Amy. Yeah.
Hello.
On what?
Agenda item number one.
The resolution.
The resolution.
I guess we're early in the month again. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Put that to a vote.
I will move adoption of resolution authorizing use of teleconferencing for Planning and Transportation Commission meetings during COVID-19 state of emergency.
Second.
Okay. Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Chair Lowy,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Rekdal,
Yes.
Commissioner Rupavar,
Yes.
Vice Chair Suma,
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton. Motion carries 7-0.
There we go. User error.
That passed unanimously. Okay. City official report.
Yes, good evening. I believe we have Nathan here on is that true, for transportation? And so he'll give the report tonight regarding transportation items, and then we can talk a little bit.
Amy, when you don't speak close to the mic, I can't hear anything you
So
say.
sorry. Okay, thank you. We have from the Office of Transportation, we have Nathan Baird. He will be giving a brief update on all things transportation in his purview. And then I'll switch over to, after that, to talk about the upcoming January meetings and a little bit about the council meetings upcoming, well, the one that's left in December. Thank you.
Amy, actually, I'll let Raphael take the lead. I have a short bit about the transit project, but I'll let Raphael kick it off.
Sure. Thank you, Nate. Well, Raphael Rios, Senior Engineer with the Office of Transportation, and then typically give updates on transportation projects. We don't have any real update or any real significant updates on our ongoing transportation project from the last meeting. But with that, Nathan is here to follow up on a request last meeting from the commission on some information related to our on-demand transit program. And Nate's here, so I'm going to hand it over to Nate.
Okay, thanks for that, Raphael. All right, so I am here to talk a little bit about our on-demand transit project. We just had had council approval to sign the contract with our selected vendor VIA. And so VIA will be providing a turnkey on-demand transit shuttle program within the city. We'll have 9 vehicles for that program. It'll operate from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. And unlike the previous shuttle program, this will be on demand and serve kind of intra Palo Alto trips. So, this is a kind of a pilot program that VTA is providing funding for to several cities throughout the region, including Palo Alto. So we will be learning quite a bit. We're really excited about VIA as our partner. They've got an established program in Cupertino that is broadening out to Santa Clara, but we'll have our own fleet in Palo Alto, and we really do expect it to help folks, that were reliant upon the previous shuttle, but also it represents a kind of a different strategy and potential to be of more use than the previous shuttles were. So again, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. The standard fare will be $3.50, but we also have a $1 fare for seniors and students and others that need that discount. So yeah, we're looking forward. We expect the service to start in March. And because we just finished up the contract, there's still a number of details that are still being worked out, but we according to terms from VTA will be launched by March 2023, and we'll have at least 18 months of service. And we'll be working hard with VIA potentially to try to find some additional funding to extend that service, but we have 18 months of service to start.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to commissioner questions for Commissioner Templeton.
Thank you for that report, Mr. Baird. Can you expand on the student fares? That sounds very interesting. What are the parameters for students? And also, if there's more than one person catching a ride, how does the fare work? Thank you.
Some of that will still be worked out. The VTA agreement, we just said that we would establish a $1 amount for students. So I actually don't have many more details on that. I can try to figure out some more in the future, but yeah. So
Particularly
right now,
wondering if minors can ride.
Oh, if minors can ride. I think there will be provision for that. But yeah, I'll have to do a little bit more research to figure out how that will work out.
And can you speak to multi-rider fares?
Multi-rider fares, I believe, the fare already represents a pretty significant subsidy. So I don't think there'll be a different fare if there's more than one person in your vehicle. But the system is, the shuttle system is designed for multiple riders to be in one vehicle. So the fares kind of are what they are.
Thanks. I just wanted you to clarify if it was per person or per ride.
Yeah, per person. But there is VIA's vehicles utilize an algorithm to help kind of trip chain or kind of consolidate some trips together, especially when going toward transit trips or connecting to other transit trips.
Thank you.
Commissioner Reckdahl.
Yeah, I'm curious, how will the fares be paid? Do you use cash? I mean, you're looking at two segments. You have seniors who are generally less technological, and then you have youngsters who are more. And so are we going to be paying on the web? Are you going to be using Clipper cards, cash? What's the plan?
So VIA provides a number of different ways to pay. The main route will be through an app that they'll be developing with Palo Alto branding involved, but there'll be numerous ways to pay via the app, but also over the phone as well. Over the phone will be the key way to reach folks that don't have access to an app. There will also be a web portal or a web page that can also be utilized to book trips and to provide payment. But yeah, there'll be means to pay via the app, the Riders app, web portal, and then also via phone.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Vice Chair Suma.
Thank you. I just had one additional question, and that is, I recently attended a La Comida lunch and noticed a huge number of elderly Chinese American Palo Altans that really, really don't speak English, and they were very much missing the shuttle before. So will there be information provided in Chinese also so that they can use it?
Yeah, we'll be working on a marketing plan with VIA, and yeah, I can look into making sure that that is available for those folks as well.
There's just a real need there, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
No other commissioner comments? Then we'll go back to Ms. French.
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay. Just a quick update. Council last week did adopt the ADU ordinance, which was focused primarily on the state legislation from 2022. And then they also did the second reading of the ordinance 5517, which had the definitions and broadening permitted uses. The Planning and Transportation Commission saw both of those, or forwarded both of those to council. The next Monday is the Home Key project, the comprehensive plan land use change. And that is the item that I'm trying to remember if Planning and Transportation Commission weighed in on that project. But anyways, I know you have interest. So there it is. That's the end of the year for council. If you notice in your packet, we do have all the dates populated for the coming year, 2023. And so check that, please, and let us know your availability or lack thereof, as the case may be. And of course, in the new year, after we have the recruitment for a new commissioner, we'll revisit the council or the assignments to represent Planning Commission at council following the month of April or so. That's the report. Nothing further for me.
Any questions of Ms. French? Okay, I see none. So we'll go to our first action item, our only action item as it turns out for tonight, which is zoning code changes to facilitate residential electrification. A number of amendments to the Palo Alto Municipal Code Title 18.
Sorry, did we skip over oral communications or not?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Let's ask if there are any, but I didn't see anybody online and I don't see anybody here. So
Okay, just
No, I didn't receive any speaker cards or raise hands for oral communications.
great. Thank you. So you have the presentation for us, please.
hello. Tonight, we're here to present on zoning code changes for residential electrification equipment. I have with me virtually Director Late and John Late, and we have Jonathan Abendschein from Utilities, as well as Christine Tam from Utilities here in the chambers. So you have in your packet a draft ordinance which covers changes to these 6 chapters on the screen, covering definitions, low-density residential, R1 zones, multifamily residential, general standards and exceptions, and parking facility design standards. The aim of the ordinance is to not only add a definition for electrification equipment, but enable the placement of such equipment within minimum side and rear yard property setbacks in residential zones. It also is to enable placement of such equipment within garages where there are required clear spaces for the parking of cars. And we get a little bit into noise, but that is not the full purview of the Planning and Transportation Commission. So it's tangential. We do plan to visit the City Council in the new year. Again, the focus and the purpose of this is to require electrification equipment for substantial remodels, that term being coined and defined in the new green building code that was adopted by council earlier this fall. And this is for substantial remodels and new construction. We're looking at barrier reduction strategies. And as a part of that, for sustainability and climate action, we're trying to loosen restrictions to ensure the success of programs such as the heat pump water heater program. And this will be helpful, especially for existing situations, existing garages, existing homes that might not have the perfect setup with the existing code as far as setbacks and clearances. So the ordinance modifies the standards for noise producing and other equipment placement. And we say in this ordinance that the equipment must still comply with the noise ordinance in Chapter 910 of the Municipal Code. The council may at some point decide to revisit the standard, which is 6 decibels above ambient. It's a conversation. And we also have an approach that would enable the planning director to maintain administrative regulations to promote and acknowledge the arrival of new equipment on the market that may be quieter than equipment we've seen to date. Let's see, next. So here I have a little bit of a Pinterest approach to sharing with you the types of charging fixtures or devices that we see. So I'm showing here in the center what we call an interior lot with the setbacks, front, rear, interior side setbacks, and then a corner lot setback that's 16 feet, the standard. And so, we have examples of people desiring to park their car in their driveway if they have one, and have access to a charging station. We have an interest in allowing folks to replace their non-heat pump water heaters with heat pump water heaters. So to that end, we acknowledge that often these are placed in garages. And again, we have a clearance, 1-car garage, modern day, current code. It's required to have a 10-foot wide clearance and a 20-foot deep clearance. And there's no provision in the code currently to allow encroachments into that space with water heaters and batteries and chargers. So we have written a draft that attempts to allow some amount of encroachment with maintaining operations such as opening car doors. Next. And then setbacks. We have the need to place various types of electrification equipment next to buildings. Sometimes these buildings are not meeting the 6-foot setback or what have you in the district that they're in. And so there are instances where, again, people want to replace equipment and we want them to replace with electrification equipment and remove impediments to that. So next, we have just a cavalcade of popular styles of such energy storage systems. Not all of these have been vetted, just a little image from the internet. But often these are slim pieces of equipment that can be stacked vertically or side by side. And so you can imagine a situation where they could be placed inside a garage, vertically or layered. And so this discusses the, and we'll get to this, but the packet discusses a certain width and depth of a garage related to these obstructions that might be caused. The next. So we start off just now going through the changes. The first is providing a definition for electrification equipment. And we have the upper definition there is what was in the packet. We have some additional improvements or refinements shown in yellow here, some ways of wording and items there that were near and dear to utilities, building, and vetted with our attorney. Again, if there's questions about this, we do have utilities here. Then we have the 2 chapters, low density residential and R1, known as single family residential. So they're very similar or exactly the same language, adding this, what's shown in underline. And then there's some strikeout as well. So the focus again is to enable placement of equipment within setbacks, but still providing a 3-foot, basically emergency access between the rear and side property lines, and then providing a minimum 10-foot side yard setback on a corner lot from such equipment. And there's further, this is just all of the changes from the ordinance. So we can go back to any of these anytime. But the idea is that, sometimes there's not going to need to be housing or insulation, and sometimes there would be in order to meet the noise ordinance. So we try to refine that with statements about these storage systems and charging stations and equipment that goes with that, such as safety bollards, that you can put those in the required on-site parking spaces, as long as we're getting that clearance that we need to open doors and such. And then this concept of the planning director having sort of maintaining a list of equipment, and as new equipment comes on board with hopefully lower and lower decibels, we'll get a chance to update as time goes on. We have the multifamily chapter, and this has something similar, but it's this section talks about, again, the 3-foot clearance along the side and rear, and the front as well. Street side, 10-foot street side. Again, we just say you must meet the noise ordinance in chapter 9.10. We're not really tampering with the noise ordinance, and at this hearing, at least. Next, we have our 1840, the general standards. And this talks about, required yards. This is seems redundant, but it's necessary because this has other farther implications beyond those chapters already covered. But basically, we're talking about now in this chapter, in this section, that we can allow 2-foot encroachment into a 20-foot standard front setback. So I'll show you an image there. This is showing this yellow line, which would facilitate placement of one of those charging stations, either attached to a garage wall, let's say, or if the garage has been converted to an ADU, let's say, they may have other places to put that because they do not need to drive into a garage. I'm showing here the dashed line would be the approximation of a 3-foot setback. Again, placement attaching to a building anywhere but in that 3-foot setback. If it needs to be housed, such as pool equipment, placing it in the back corner with appropriate housing and insulation. The visual screening that is in place in the code would be waived basically for the car charging and storage systems and the bollards. And then we have the parking chapter. Here's where it gets a little more interesting as far as trying to, with words, describe what we're talking about. And we acknowledge there's more wordsmithing that can happen. Basically, and I put at the bottom in yellow, the goal is that we do not want to have something less than 18 feet clear at the ground level for the depth and 8'6" clear at the ground level for the width inside a 1-car garage. Then we wrote this to try to approximate, well, if you have an 18-foot garage, let's say 18-foot depth, you can still put some equipment, but it has to be raised up 4 feet above that floor on the back wall, let's say. And of course, it can be on the side walls, but we need to be able to have the nose of the car, and I'll show you on an image here next, what I'm trying to describe with words. So if you had, say, an 18-foot deep garage, then you wouldn't want to have a structure come all the way down to the floor, because now if it's an 18-inch wide fixture or appliance, you're not having the room to nose your car in. So in this instance, you could raise that equipment up to 4 feet above, and then the car could nestle under that equipment. So that concludes my presentation. Just one note is we have what's called the R1 technical manual, and we would want to go and update that because there are images in there that show how it is today. And of course, we're updating the code. So now I would invite, and we have David Chung here from our building department. So he's been intimately working with me about a month or so ago when we started talking about all of this. And so he's here for expertise as well as the utilities. And I don't know, John, if you have anything you want to weigh in on as part of the presentation, or we can just get right into Planning Commission questions.
Did either of the folks from city staff want to speak or just be a reference?
I think they're here to answer questions.
Okay, that's fine. I think we'll do an opportunity to have a little bit of questioning, but not too deep. And then I want to go to public comment. So let's see. First up is Commissioner Templeton.
Thank you, Chair. While this slide is up, Ms. French, I was going to ask if you can update the contact address for this program. Just to help you keep your records straight, because I don't know if you want to, if you're still, I don't, anyway. The question I wanted to ask, and I didn't hear it in the presentation, and I'm sure it's as we get closer and closer on interior buildings, closing that space between them, do we have any additional fire concerns, especially with battery storage and other kinds of electricity?
Well, there have been instances of battery malfunction for energy storage systems. I understand there's some new technology around here already that make these batteries safer. I don't know if I am not a fire expert. We do have David Chung if there are technical questions regarding
Yeah. So
fire
I'm not
codes.
talking about the product, but just in general, as we start having these kinds of structures closer to each other, it does. We've talked about spacing, we've talked about screening and all the other things. We haven't talked about any additional fire safety stuff. So I would love to hear if we have any thoughts on that. Thank you.
Good evening. So David Chung, Assistant Building Official. So every project that provide equipment coming in, we do have fire personnel reviewing it. But as far as ESS and so forth, there are some provision that has requirement that how close you can have to opening. Can it be located inside a building and so forth? So we do have that into review by fire department. So we do look at those.
Okay, so it sounds like that's part of the planning process, but not necessarily part of this code review.
Not this code review, but we do talk to fire. I think Amy reached out to us, and then we also talk to fire also in this consideration. So we do implant those safety in this proposal.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Chang.
Thanks for this report, Ms. French. One of the questions that I had was aside from the noise ordinance, are we addressing all the concerns that were raised by the public comments that have, like the 3 public comments that you included in the packet? In other words, it was hard for me because I don't understand all the equipment and all the technical requirements so well to know, okay, like here's the issue. Here's issue 1, here's issue 2, here's issue 3, here's where that's addressed. And so I was wondering, because the public comments seem to all bring up very valid concerns. And so is it staff's understanding that aside from the changes that will eventually potentially need to be made in the noise ordinance, that we are pretty much addressing everything that's been raised in the public comments?
Whether it's everything, because we did get some public comments
No,
late
sorry,
in the day.
just these three, I guess, the ones that are in the, I know you couldn't have addressed things. You couldn't have addressed things that came in since the packet was put out.
Yeah, whether we address them to the satisfaction of the commenter, I do not know. But it was considered, and certainly we're standing here at the first hearing with you, and any feedback is welcome.
Okay, thanks. I for the future for this kind of thing, it might be helpful to have sort of a table or something that kind of specifies specifically what each issue is, and then like tie it to your point. You don't know. We don't know if we're doing it to the satisfaction of the commenter, but this is the part of the ordinance that's meant to address this specific issue, if that makes sense.
Sure, I understand layout preferences.
No, I just can't tell if all the issues are being addressed, and I can't. Sure. So yeah, okay, thanks.
I'm sure we'll hear if they're not.
Okay.
Any other initial questions from commissioners? If not, let's go to public comment. I'm sorry? It's not. Oh, hold on, sorry. These name tags are in slightly different places tonight, so.
Okay, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Just a informational question. We have a lot of homes in Palo Alto that have gas-driven radiant heat systems. And it's in reading the staff report, it's feeling to me like as we transition away from gas into electricity, some of these transitions are going to be sort of mandatory. You go in to do certain things to your house, and these may be requirements. And so I'm just wondering, because I just haven't heard of it, is there, can a radiant heat system be driven with an electrical water heater as opposed to the gas that predominate in Palo Alto, if we know?
Expertise in the audience here from the city, please.
Good evening. My name is Christine Tam. I'm a senior resource planner with the utilities department. We, as in the utilities department, we have been working with different vendors and contractors about electrification solution for single family homes, and the radiant heating system that you refer to in Eichler's have definitely been a challenge because it requires air to water heat pump systems, which are less common compared to the typical air to air heat pump systems for space heating. There are commercial solutions available. I can show you that. They're not widely deployed yet. So we're still trying to find out about the performance of these systems. That I know of, there are at least 3 manufacturers that produces these type of products.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Rectal?
I want to make clear, is this only for remodeling? This is not for new construction? So new construction, for example, would have to place their whole, even if they're going electric, place all their equipment within the setbacks. Is that correct?
This is for both substantial remodel and new construction as far as the electrification requirement in the Green Building Code. As far as this draft ordinance, we're proposing this loosening of restrictions, not just for remodels, but for all properties,
Okay.
residential.
I see Director Lade on screen.
Yeah, no, that's right. Thank you, Ms. French, for that. The one maybe clarification on that is for the garage, the intrusion into the garage space. That might be an area where the commission may want to weigh in on that. What we're presenting tonight are encroachments really to accommodate existing conditions. and a new construction or new garage, we would still want the project to meet the 20 by 10 requirement if they're doing enclosed parking.
I mean, this loosening makes a lot of sense for existing homes, just save less flexibility. If you now are starting construction, I don't think it would be that much of a hardship to incorporate this within the setbacks. So it seems a little unnecessary to give these breaks for new construction.
Any other preliminary comments from commissioners? Okay, then let's go to public comment, both online and in chambers.
Yes, we have one in person and two online. So first we have Hamilton Hitchings here in the chambers. You have 5 minutes.
I want to thank staff very much for bringing this item to the PTC, including Amy French, who I've had the opportunity to discuss this with. I strongly support it with a few minor tweaks as described in the V2 version of the email I sent this afternoon. This includes a proposed motion at the top of the email for commissioners to consider. Just a little background. This fall, I signed a contract to install an electric heat pump HVAC mini system. So I would no longer need to rely on burning gas to heat my house and also to provide some air conditioning during very hot summer days. Many people, including myself, want to install this equipment on their side yard or behind their garage so it's not visible and is quieter. Because I am on a corner lot, I am subject to special zoning limitations that require a 20-foot setback for what I consider my side yard, but Palo Alto Municipal Code considers my backyard. Thus, the current code does not allow me to place electrification equipment on the side of my garage or even behind my garage. Therefore, I temporarily canceled the contract to install a mini split HVAC heat pump until changes to the building code are instituted. I also put on hold installing the one electric hot water heater I would actually consider installing, the Sanko 2, which allows me to place a whisper quiet compressor outside next to my garage, thus negating the negative impacts, including having my laundry room become very cold. Thus, allow me to explain my two recommended minor tweaks to staff's proposal. Under section 18.10.040, add an explicit carve out for the specific types of electrical equipment that should not be housed or insulated. These are electric heat pump HVACs, ESS, that's electrical storage systems, ESVE, that's car chargers, and standalone electric heat pump compressors for hot water heaters, currently the Sanko 2. The way staff has written this would require special approval by the planning director for equipment which is not designed to be housed or insulated, yet require special director approval to not house and insulate them. So they're not supposed to be housed or insulated, but you would still need special approval by the director to not house or insulate them. If we want to remove barriers to electrification, let's not institute new artificial, unneeded ones and waste staff's time. For example, HVAC heat pumps, where the maximum air circulation with a fan is required to properly exchange heat. I'm not proposing that these types of equipment be exempted from the noise ordinance, which will still apply even with this change. And the second minor tweak is in section 18.54.020, section 4, number 2. Thanks to Amy, she's already made a little modification, so it's not as important, but I think it would still be helpful to clarify the language, clarify that ESVE and other electrical equipment can be placed on either side of the car as long as there's clearance to open the doors, regardless of the length of the garage and parking spot. The reason I bring this up is because my garage was built in the 60s, it's substandard, and it didn't meet the minimum height, the minimum length requirement as described in the text. And even though this was staff's intent to allow you to put stuff on either side of the car as long as it doesn't block the doors, the way it's written, it could be interpreted by somebody enforcing this as not allowing any electrical equipment in your garage except on the back wall, 4 feet up if you have a short garage like I do. So it's just a minor tweak. It wasn't staff's intention, but I think it should be clarified so there's no disambiguity. I hope you will consider the text of my proposed motion as a starting point. I want to thank staff again for working on this, and if passed by City Council, would allow me to proceed with my electrification plans for my house. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Brett Anderson on Zoom. If you can unmute yourself, you have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am also planning electrification of my home here in the Palo Verde neighborhood, and we have 8-foot setbacks in our neighborhood. So that's preventing me from installing heat pump condenser in the side yard. And I was reading the draft ordinance, and it's just not clear to me. And I don't know if this comes later in the discussion, but just to show what the practical implication is for the popular types of heat pumps that people would be installing, or popular models. The ones that I've been looking at are in the 55 to 57 decibel range, according to the manufacturer's specification sheets. And that's on the low end. That's for the inverter style heat pumps, which are higher performance and quieter. So I'm not sure how that at all relates to the 6 decibels above local ambient outside noise levels. So it's just hard to see that, I think, from at least a public perspective, looking in on what's changing here. And also there are a lot of popular models that have these kind of square box shaped heat pump systems that probably approach 3 feet square. So how would that fit in a 6-foot setback if there's also some clearance to the wall of the building? So just, I think, having some list of popular models and how that's accommodated by the code change here would be very instructive for us. Say this is a very good change, and it's really going to open things up, I think, for electrification for folks, and hopefully improve the number of permits that people apply for. And one more point on the permit streamlining, perhaps there could be some kind of incentive for people who register their electrification equipment with the city, because for the city to know where this equipment is and understanding future demand management requirements and benefits, perhaps it's worth providing some kind of credit on the bill for folks who have registered equipment, at least the large items like heat pumps and EV chargers. And that's similar to what's been piloted by PG&E, where they give a $5 credit to folks who sign up for the water heater demand management program. So I'll put that forth just as an idea or a suggestion for the conversation. Thank you.
Next, also on Zoom is David Cole. If you can unmute yourself.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is David Cole, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. I agree with the previous 2 speakers and just wanted to thank staff for being proactive on this. These changes in setbacks are quite necessary to bring about electrification for many of our homes, especially the older ones, and the older requirements and different requirements in different neighborhoods, in fact. So this is a great step forward, and hope that you can err on the side of allowing, as you said, reducing the barriers as much as possible to allow electrification to happen. Climate change is not going to wait around for the Palo Alto process to get to this, and I'm so glad that you're addressing this now. Thank you so much.
I think that's all the public speakers we have.
Okay, that's the last speaker online. Okay.
Yes.
All right, let's come back to the commission for more in-depth questions and discussions. I think we can combine that. And if we need to do a second round, we can do that as well. So keep it kind of informal, but talking about the issues, if need be if someone wants to refer to the ordinance, that's perfectly fine, or we can also take a look at that at the end. So let's see, Commissioner Chang's up first.
I have questions about whether electric vehicle charging units can be placed in driveways. My understanding is that they cannot be based on the amount, like they cannot be any more than 2 feet into the front yard setback. Is that correct? Based on the current?
The proposed ordinance
Yes, the
would
proposed-
allow 2 feet encroachment in that front yard setback forward of the, within that 20-foot
right.
standard minimum setback.
Okay, so as I was thinking about this, I was concerned that we might need to be even more flexible, especially because of we're just depending, we're doing ADUs. We don't have all the same parking spaces that we might have. And so I could easily see somebody wanting to put a charging unit, not necessarily just 2 feet, say, in front of their garage, but maybe like to the side of their driveway. And so it's just a thought that I had, and it might be necessary given all the, given all the ADU stuff that we're doing and the reduced parking requirements. So that's just a thought. And then the second question I had, and maybe it's a non-issue because I didn't see the updated version 2 comment from Mr. Hitchings, but his first public comment that I saw had raised an issue of storage units, electric, batteries that are not lithium batteries. And so I thought that was a good comment, and had the same question about can be placed in the sun versus others. I just don't have the technical expertise on it, but did just look at battery storage, and did, the battery storage salesman did explain to me about different types of batteries and different concerns with different ones. So wondering if staff can answer.
Yes, as I noted to Mr. Hitchings, the ordinance does not specify anything about batteries having to be outside of the sun. I think it was just a part of the staff report narrative that discussed, anecdotally or what have you, from past experience. But yes, there are these new lithium ion, something that doesn't involve, cobalt, that is the responsible chemical for catching fire somehow. So.
Okay, so there's nothing in the ordinance. Yeah, as I think about it, I didn't see anything about
nothing
that.
in the ordinance.
So we're not preventing anything with that. Okay, great. And then my final, it's a comment. I was just wondering if we think we have sufficient flexibility for all the non-conforming situations that there likely are in the city. So for example, the older houses that were like College Terrace, for example. There's a lot of people living there. I can see how the setbacks and the limitation of the setbacks are going to prevent electrification there. So I'm just wondering, how do we handle that? Is there a way to have more flexibility, or then is staff going to be inundated by a whole bunch of, there's a lot of things like, well, the planning director can make this decision, but we can't have the planning director making all these decisions. So I guess I'm just raising it's just a comment.
Yes, we would rather not be inundated. I think that's one of the purpose of an ordinance, to try to imagine and flush out all the possible permutations and combinations. Of course, we'll never get all of them. And someone will come in with, a 3-foot side yard that wants to put something in that 3 feet. And then what will we do? I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, it's stuff like that. And I can already see houses where I'm thinking, well, where are they going to put their charging unit for here? So yeah. And then pretty soon California is not going to allow sale of gas powered cars. So we need to allow for some way to deal with those like soon.
Yeah.
The overworked planning director is back on screen if you would like to address this issue.
Thank you. So I think that Commissioner Chang, thank you for that question. On the side yard setback, I believe that, that's really driven by life safety interests and wanting to make sure that the fire department, if they need to service a property, has access. So I don't think we would be looking for any further reduction in that dimension. But your earlier comment about encroachment into the front yard setback, I think is one worth the commission's consideration, and exploring the possibility in those scenarios that you've described of maybe providing a standard that would allow for a greater flexibility. Our ultimate goal with this ordinance is to really minimize the zoning barriers to allow electrification to take place. And so this is our first cut at it. But if the commission has some recommendations how we can go further, we would certainly welcome that feedback as a recommendation to the city council. And we may come back to the public comment about that code section at some point. And if we do, I can comment on that. But to be clear, we're not trying to set up an ordinance where we're creating, waivers where the director needs to get involved in decision making. We actually want to minimize any discretionary review so that we're not having a conversation and it's more automated and ministerial as opposed to discretionary. We want to streamline the process. We want to get out of the way. We want to establish some clear objective standards by which everybody understands sort of the rules of the road and they can proceed accordingly. Thank you, Chair.
Vice Chair Suma.
Thank you. And I was going to pile on to Commissioner Chang's comments, and that is because, and it's partly what a member of the public, his house, the orientation of where's the front of your house is a problem for houses that are sideways. And there are a lot of those. And there's instances of non-conforming situations where, for instance, right down the block from me, and it's getting 2 ADUs, so there will be no backyard at all, and no real side setbacks. And it has the whole width of the front is for 3 cars. The whole thing is a parking apron, and it's only deep enough for cars, 1 car. So they wouldn't be able to put a charger there in any way. There's no garages. And so, yeah, it's the same problem. And it's an example, and we have an example of corner lots being sort of problematic. And I think we should have more flexibility. Similarly, there are a lot of houses in College Terrace, such as my own, that do not have garages at all. And my house is sideways and it's not even on a corner, it's on a private alley sideways. So I don't know where I would put it exactly. So if we can somehow say, unless those conditions don't exist, and then still allow people to put in chargers. So those are just 2 examples, my very own house, Mr. Hitchings' house, and then this 4-unit apartment building down the block. And that kind of situation is not that uncommon in my neighborhood because of the age of my neighborhood. So I think it would be helpful to find some language to, as an alternative for situations that don't have that typical 20-foot setback and a driveway. That was my comment on that.
I'll make a couple comments, not seeing any other lights at the moment. I want to comment generally on 2 of the areas, one which we're on, so I'm going to stay on it, which is that, as we all stated, the idea here is to get electrification done. And we're facing a crisis here. We're trying to address a crisis. So if the simple fix is to, on an old garage that's non-conforming, somehow do an exception or a variance to get there, that's what we ought to do, because that's how we solve the problem. Similarly, like in corner lots, full disclosure, I have a corner lot. So I feel Mr. Hitchings' pain, but I didn't think of it in this regard because I hadn't gotten that far with electrification yet, but they're just different. And again, if we're really trying to get people to change and he's willing to change, we need to have some flexibility, as Director Late said, to address that. And whether or not that's a simple variance that someone has to file, or there's separate rules for corner lots or whatever. That's what I would encourage to see in here, some flexibility to really move it forward. So then I would say the opposite on what the other thing we're talking about is, I'm saying it sort of humorously, but as a question. In all kinds of places, for example, on packet page 17, and it talks at the top about noise. It'll be primarily, this guideline will be primarily applied where the outdoors use is a major consideration. Further on down, it says, well, if it's feasible, we can do it, but we don't define it. Further on down, we say, as close to the standard as feasible. So it sounds to me like there's still a lot of ambiguity around sort of getting the standards in there, and that's okay. I guess my question is more to the attorneys on our commission as well as staff. If you really feel that ambiguity has been addressed when we get to the ordinance to cover, most cases, so that it's not just quite as here, well, we'll get as close as we can, because I don't know how you enforce that. So it's kind of two different sides of, still making this work, but we do want to solve for it. In another place, the staff report very smartly pointed out that we have to look at neighborhood noise, not just the home noise, because if everybody does this and they're all, 65 instead of 50, then we got another problem, which I was really pleased to see that in there. So those two sides of the coin, maybe the staff could address, or our attorney could address if Mr. Yang thinks that this is now captured or that needs a little bit of work.
I'll start. What I understood you to say, packet page 17. So that's a page about noise. So this is what the topic that we're on is noise.
Yeah.
And it is an interesting topic, and has a lot of breadth to it. What is ambient noise? How loud is it if you go 6 above ambient noise? And is there wiggle room? What about the equipment? Some of this equipment we're hearing from members of the public that's going to be, closer to 70 or 60 something once you get to, and if you're in a quiet setting, what if you're in a quiet setting that's only 40 ambient, and now, you've got an equipment that's 50. So these are the kinds of things. Any noise ordinance changes today, that's a different chapter of the municipal code, and we'll be investigating that in 2023 and working more on that related not just to this equipment, but other equipment. For now, we basically say meet the noise ordinance, and we have some flexibility, and we're looking to have somebody mention, well, what kinds of equipment. We would like to have a range of equipment on a handout that says, we have experience with this equipment. We attach something to the staff report that shows some of the noise producing equipment and the levels there. So, we're in a process of investigating with the help of utilities to, to see what noise these things do make. And in some cases that you could put a blanket around them, certain types of special fabric that would mitigate noise and not have to put a housing around it per se.
Thank you for that answer. Director Late, do you want to add?
Thank you. Yes. So we, as Amy noted, we're still researching this. We want to acknowledge that this is all well and good, to reduce our setbacks. But if we're going to get a bunch of complaints because there's now noise issues in neighborhoods, that's an area where, we need to address, those issues so that they are compatible with each other. And so our approach is we're reaching out to a consultant to help us sort of understand, noise and these systems, because noise is a bit of a tricky thing to measure, and the circumstances which noise travels. But the concept that we're wanting to do or implement is to establish a threshold that these systems are presumed compliant. And if these systems meet that decibel threshold or fall below it, we're not going to require a noise study or a test to verify compliance. And so we want to get some additional data to validate what that right number is, and we don't have that today. It's not going to be higher than the standard of the code today. At least that's our initial sort of position on this until we get more information. We don't want to make our neighborhoods noisier. We do want to make these systems fit into them, and we are learning from folks in the community and our experience through our interdepartments that this technology is a lot quieter than it ever was when this noise ordinance was first established. So we want to use that opportunity for the improved technology to place these appropriate units in the yard. So so we're going to have more on that when we get to the city council. We didn't want to wait, as one of the public commenters noted, global warming is not going to wait for us to finish this process. We kind of want to work on these things in tandem, understanding that we may not be able to satisfy all the commission's interest in this, but the takeaway is we don't want to make it any noisier in our yards. We want to use the technology that's available. We want to get some steady, and we want to define a presumptive compliance standard.
What about the other aspect of the issue that I raised? Should we be looking at more exceptions, either by variance or some other means, such as?
Thank you for that, Chair. Definitely not by variance, and I think what you're saying is some kind of relaxing of the code, but variance is a trigger word for planners. I would say let's bake into the ordinance the standard that you're willing to accept. If we want more flexibility in the front and corner street side yards, maybe the commission can discuss what would be appropriate. I do think, and perhaps our folks from utilities could weigh in on this. I do think we're exploring some pilot programs where chargers may be placed even in the public right of way. So it may be that this proximity to front property lines is maybe less of a concern going forward. I don't know. That's where I'd really like to get the commission's feedback on that. But not a discretionary process, something objective that clearly says you can do this.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you for those comments. Commissioner Templeton?
Thank you. Just thinking about some of the comments we've heard from the commissioners and from the members of the public, what percent No idea, right? We don't know.
No, of course not.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's my concern. If we're going to reject any person's application, how are we going to handle that with our city goals? Are we going to come back to them and say, well, you can't do it the way you've asked, but here's what we suggest, and this is possible. We have some of these edge cases with certain homes that might not be approved at all to move to electric in these cases, and I'm worried about that. It does happen already. People are discouraged or put their plans on hold. And I think we need to think about that as a city, as a planning department. What are we going to do to take somebody who's ready and willing to convert to electric, who's got a weird situation, an edge case? So I don't know if that is something you could speak to at this point, but I'd sure like to hear it.
Yeah, again, I don't have any percentages. One of the, I don't know if we're going to get through the round of all commissioners, but I would like to address again the matter of the front yard. I want to make sure to go back to basically it's slide 18 and have a discussion about what's the front and what's the side, because I think there's some wiggle room there that we might want to have a discussion about.
Could you speak to my question? Like
the percentage?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Templeton. So in these, so this is not. I appreciate you raising that question. That is not in our ordinance today, but this might be an area where you want to allow for some discretion, and maybe even notice to neighbors if you're looking to do something beyond what the relaxed standards might be. And the notion here would be, these are edge cases. These are scenarios that, due to certain circumstances, the location of existing buildings on a site, whatever, sort of findings we want to, sort of craft, and we would certainly work with Albert and the attorney's office. Maybe the commission has some ideas too. We could come up with some standards by which we could evaluate those requests and make a decision and have that decision be appealable. Or we'd probably want to just fold it into some existing system that we have. As I say that, I just want to be cautious that we don't hold up this process. So if we can find some way to embed that into it, that would be great. If we need to come back and have another conversation about it, maybe that's what we need to do, but just want to make sure that we're trying to move forward too. But I appreciate you raising that issue.
Thank you. I agree. We should continue forward with the regular case, not the edge case. But what I'm concerned about is we have no idea if we're properly describing the regular case, and how our net is crafted, so to speak, that what we're describing here is going to work for 80% or higher of the applications. So I would suggest also that, and we don't have to do it tonight, but I would suggest also that we look at a time frame at which to check in and say, if we've operated with 1 year under the new code, check back in and say, did we do it correctly, or do we need to adjust it? Because we're really in uncharted territory here. We don't know. So that would be the way I would suggest handling it. Thank you.
Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you. A few items. The first one, so what we're looking at tonight are these changes in ordinance to reduce barriers to allowing electrification. And the question I'd asked earlier about the radiant heat, with the answers, the concern actually is kind of the flip side of that is tempering requirements to electrify. Because the concern I have is with sort of the technology from the information we had tonight, technology not entirely known. I'm concerned that somebody in a remodel could be, trip one of these triggers. Now I'm required to electrify, but either the technology that I'm required to buy in, it's not yet certain, or I have to buy a commercial application for my residents because that's all that's available. And so I just want staff, as this moves forward to council, to look at the ordinance to make sure it doesn't do that. And I didn't expect to see it in the staff report because it's really not the focus of the staff report tonight was reducing barriers. And this is kind of the opposite side of that. And so, and I'm not looking for an off the cuff response from staff. I would ask staff to look at that to make sure we're not going to require people to do something that's unreasonable. So that was the first point. Second item, I was actually interested in an item in Mr. Hitchens, I think he called it a 2.0, what he sent in this afternoon that he didn't mention in his remarks. And that is this issue about the 6 dB above ambient. And I just kind of thought it was an interesting point that he made that in some circumstances, so the goal as described in the staff report is 60 dB. This is an outside sound level, right? And so if, for example, let's say Chair Lowing lives in an area where the 60 dB is the ambient noise level, and somebody can bring in their equipment. And the test is going to be, it can't raise the ambient by more than 6 dB. That's the proposed standard in the ordinance, right? So that could push Chair Lowing's ambient up to 66 dB. Meanwhile, let's say I live in an unusually quiet neighborhood and my ambient is 51. And somebody comes in and they have that 6 dB limit, so they can push my ambient to 57. In that instance, we're not protecting all Palo Alto citizens the same way, because I am getting a quieter result than Chair Lowing in his neighborhood. And so it's just kind of an interesting question. On the one hand, it's fair because it's 6 dB in both instances, but in the other, you're sort of rewarding somebody for being in a quieter neighborhood and keeping that neighborhood quieter. And I'm not sure that's right. And so I was curious if staff had, and I know that Mr. Hitchens' letter just came in late this afternoon, so the staff I don't expect would have discussed it. But I'm wondering if staff had already had this thought and talked about that potential aspect of, do we want a numeric limit that an increase that applies across the board, rather than just rely on everybody in Palo Alto is entitled to 60 with these noise producing increments. Essentially, everybody in Palo Alto is at risk, if you will, of pushing up to 66. So I'm wondering if staff's had that discussion, and if they did, where they came down.
I have not had a discussion with other members of the staff since discussion with Mr. Hitchens regarding the proposal to raise the overall to six above 60 as a flat or a nominal steady number. So that would be something to discuss further.
Okay. All right. And so I guess as we continue to cycle through comments, I am interested in since staff is looking for direction, actually a motion, if there's interest in that, or if the commission is, satisfied with the direction that staff has taken. I think I could go either way, but I do think it's an interesting question and worth some discussion. All right. Then I had a couple of ordinance potential tweaks. Ms. French, can you pull up, I think it's slide 10.
Slide.
Where in the ordinance do you want to tweak?
Well, it's on packet page 23.
Can you tell me which chapter it is? Sorry.
Yeah, so this is development standards 18.10.040 on packet page
Got it.
23. Again, your slides were numbered at the bottom, so I thought that might
Yep.
be helpful to you.
Yep. Screen.
Actually, yeah. Oh, actually, I guess it's 9.
Okay. Hold on.
Sorry, that's 11. Go back. See the number at the bottom corner there?
Mhm. Well, let's see.
I'm talking about the okay, it's 9, I guess. Go back to the one that's numbered 9 in the bottom corner of the slide.
With the yellow highlights.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so this is, again, this is unavoidable lawyer training. So we've defined electrical equipment here, and you notice it as capital E, capital E. So when I saw that, I expected that as I read through all of these other ordinance changes where that term is used repeatedly, it would, just like the bottom of this paragraph, have capital E, capital E. But what I found is, as we go through the rest of the ordinance, it's almost all lowercase e, lowercase e. And so the question here is sort of, what is Palo Alto style? Either we define it in caps, but it's always in lowercase, and maybe we do that. My memory, when we did the retail ordinance 3-4 sessions ago, I think we had a new term, drive through something or other, or drive in, to distinguish it from a restaurant. And I think it was capitalized throughout. So I would just like staff to look at that and be consistent. So it's all caps, no caps, whatever. And then if you can next go to 2 more slides past this, I think it looks like these are all, go to the next one, I think, which is at 13 at the bottom. Yeah, that one, 13. Okay. So this second provision, and this ties kind of indirectly to another public comment we had from Mr. Hitchens, where he was wanting things specifically identified. I think what is provided here in subpart 3 gets to what Mr. Hitchens was wanting. It's just not inside the ordinance, but rather it's a separate list of equipment that, and frankly, I like that approach because it gives us more flexibility to add new equipment as it sort of passes the test without having to come back and amend the ordinance. What the subpart 3 says is that the planning director can, publish a list of equipment that can presumptively be installed without housing and insulation. And the basis for that list is not stated here. And I think it would be clearer if we just add at the end of that, let's see, the language that I thought would work is if you just add after insulation, due to noise generation below applicable maximums. Due to noise generation below applicable maximums. Because I think that's really, that is the criteria that the director is going to use in creating that list. And so I think it's helpful to state it there. And so this is part of H3, subpart H3, which is on packet page 24. You have the identical provision on packet page 25, which is the same ordinance, subpart L3. And then on packet page 26, you have the identical provision, which is section 18.13.040B1D, like dog. So I think if staff is amenable to that change, I think it could go in all three places and improve the ordinance in that modest way. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Can I just ask you a question about that?
Sure.
On packet page 24, do you feel that it really needs the planning director may permit installation without housing and insulation?
Sorry, say it again.
It's right under where it says including electrification equipment in that top section there. It says it has to be insulated unless the director says it doesn't have to be insulated. So aren't we getting back into the director has to make every decision again with that language?
Well, I think the point of subpart 3, a little bit lower on that page, is if the director has already included this piece of equipment on the list, then essentially the director has decided,
right,
without going through a new decision-making process.
Right. So why is that necessary to even have in there?
Why is part 3?
Yeah, in case a piece of equipment isn't.
Well, because without part 3, it indicates that the director has to make a case-by-case decision. He has to reanalyze possibly the same piece of equipment, 10 times if it comes in 10 times. With 3, I think the reason they wrote it, and staff can defend themselves, but I think it was to allow them to have basically a pass-go, a quick pass-go, so that when number 1 applies and he has to decide whether or not to permit the installation without housing and insulation, if it's on the list, which is authorized by 3, then it's almost automatic.
Okay.
So I think it works.
Okay, good. It was a lawyerly question. I went to the source. Commissioner Rectal?
Yeah, noise is a tricky subject, and I think the path forward that Commissioner laid out was sensible. Particularly, I think that having a list of equipment that's presumed that a homeowner knows they can use, pull it off that list, I can use that. I don't have to worry about jumping through hoops for that. But for some background, for noise right now, how do we enforce the noise ordinance? So if someone wants to put in, say, a swimming pool pump, what's the process that we use right now to determine whether that pump is going to violate the noise ordinance?
Well, it needs to, first of all, as far as placement in the building permit set, it needs to show that it is meeting the locational requirements. And in some cases, we will, I believe in all cases for single family and 2-family, and I suppose for multifamily as well, we would see a cut sheet, say, of that piece of equipment. Then on the enforcement side, because we do that too, we will need to go out and, bring a iPhone or whatever, smartphone measuring.
So we do a survey for every.
No, not only upon complaint basis. Currently, I think with this program being new and the pilot program and such, and going into setbacks,
but
what I'm about to say is I think we would have our inspectors, our building inspectors, be able to measure these things, test it, before we do a final on that building permit, if that helps.
Okay, so Director Late, did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I just, I think Amy, on Commissioner Rectal's question about swimming pool pumps or any noise producing equipment, maybe you said this, we require a spec sheet for one that demonstrates, at least at that level, that the noise equipment is to meet our anticipated to meet our noise standards. And it's after installation, if there's any question about its compliance, we require a test to verify that. And if it is found to be not compliant, we start implementing some noise mitigating measures if they were not previously known to be needed in our initial review. If there's equipment that's on the borderline or known to be over, and we're going to mitigate it with sound with some kind of insulation or sound buffering, we will front load that analysis as best we can so that we know after installation we're not creating a problem. And so that's one way that we do that. This system here, or what we would approach to do here, is similar. Again, presumptively assume that equipment complies. And if it's not going to comply, be really clear that it needs to be mitigated to comply, or it can't be located in the required yard. This would still likely be a complaint-driven initiative. Measuring noise is a challenging issue that requires specialized equipment. And I appreciate Amy's problem-solving solution in the field with our inspectors, but I can assure you they're not going to be measuring noise of the equipment. They're going to be moving from one job to the next. And so what we really want to do is be clear about what's that presumptive threshold, and then what are the solutions for having somebody be able to mitigate that going forward.
If we had a constant noise, ambient noise over the whole city, this becomes pretty easy. You look at the spec sheet, you see how much noise is going to be, you look at the placement and say how much roll off is going to be to the property line. You can calculate, is it going to exceed? But now we vary from neighborhood to neighborhood with existing ambient noises. And so when we're evaluating building permits, how do we do that? How do we determine ahead of time whether this is a reasonable equipment to put in?
Yeah, and Amy can probably answer this one, but our comp plan sets forth these CNEL sort of levels, these noise levels, equivalent noise levels across the city, and has already done that analysis to understand sort of on this neighborhood basis the ambient noise that exists. And that's how we have our standard that's embedded in the noise ordinance. So we're not going to your house and measuring it at that point in time. As part of the comprehensive plan that was done now 7 years ago. Gosh, is that right?
So there's a map in the comp plan that lists ambient noise over the whole city?
Yes.
Amy, we have those maps, right, as part of the noise element?
Yes, I just answered yes.
Okay.
On packet page 6 or staff report page 6, there is a table N1 that was excerpted from the comprehensive plan, and that shows, the different noise levels and what that's like. But I did not excerpt the map of the city, but that is also in the comprehensive plan, and it shows, for instance, along El Camino Real, it's 70 CNEL, and there's a different way of measuring too. It's over the whole day kind of thing.
Okay. So every lot. So if someone applies for a building permit, you go through the math and you say this equipment produces this much noise, and then you look up what the ambient noise is for that and determine whether it's appropriate. So we actively do that for every building permit?
I'm not there for every building permit, but ideally we would, it's not house by house. It's not uploaded into our GIST system for each property, but if the person is checking that map in the comprehensive plan to see, oh, we're next to El Camino. Oh, we're in this part of town where the ambient is X. It's not parcel by parcel in our system.
And if I can just weigh in, Commissioner Rectal, I think if somebody's doing a replacement equipment, we're going to take a look. We're going to ask for the spec sheet because some of that equipment may already be existing in a non-compliant, condition. For a new home, these things are set back, somewhat typically, and I think it's really a reflection of the technology has changed a lot. Even the non-heat pump systems, the traditional HVAC systems, when that technology has actually improved a lot. And so we're not seeing as many, complaints about that.
Oh, yeah.
It's usually the older equipment that we're getting complaints about.
Yeah, I mean, some of the new mini splits are quite quiet. So,
very quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but the question I have is, so as part of the building permit process, do we always evaluate noise, or do we wait for the building to be built and then rely on complaints before we investigate noise?
So like Amy, she and I aren't doing, plan reviews, but here's what I can tell you we should be doing. If somebody's proposing equipment that's in a required yard, we should be taking a look at the specification sheets, which we ask for frequently. And if they show that they're meeting the noise threshold that's set forth in our policy documents, that's where the analysis ends. We presume that that's going to comply.
Okay.
If we get a noise complaint, we'll investigate it further. A property owner can't maintain that equipment, even if we issued a permit in error. If we get a complaint and there's some equipment that is, clearly violating the noise ordinance, we would require the property owner to correct that.
Okay.
So there is a correctable course of actions that can be taken to mitigate the problem.
Okay.
And I'll just add to that because we have other staff that listen in on meetings such as this. And so our current planning manager, Jody, notes that we do check each permit for noise producing equipment, and we check the spec sheet against the comprehensive plan.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's very good. So there's nothing changed about this. This is just,
That's correct.
We're just proceeding normal procedure, no new procedures needed. Okay, we talked about batteries. Does the fire department have any best practices or guidelines for installing batteries in homes?
So, Amy, I'll weigh in on this, and then Mr. Chung might want to add to this. We have been very much engaged with our colleagues in the fire department, and I know that they have a lot of meetings with their colleagues in other jurisdictions. And there are state standards that establish the parameters that allow for the placement and siting of this equipment. And there's even some standards that the state has already authorized or allowed that we're not quite there yet to be able to stack certain batteries on top of each other. We're not yet convinced that that system works. The short answer is nothing about this ordinance changes anything to do with energy storage systems. All we're saying is where they can be placed or allowed to encroach. All of the existing state standards continue to apply and would not be affected at all by these standards.
Okay, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. Okay, thank you.
Okay. It seems like that's the end of our first round. Anyone have any other questions, or we want to start talking about the motion that's presented and or amendments? Commissioner Chang.
Should we talk about the driveway issue or the front yard setback issue first before we go into the motion? Okay.
That's
I
fine
would
if you
like
want.
the opportunity to share my screen and for a minute. Just wanted to call your attention to how we call front yards versus side yards. So the front yard is described by a line that is across at the 20-foot minimum, and sometimes that coincides with the front wall of the house, like in this picture. One thing that's of interest is, there is this part of the front yard that's, if you were to draw this line further, maybe the 3-foot line, you might see in some cases a low fence, a 4-foot fence. So, separating one house front yard to the next. So this may be an area of opportunity if you're thinking about, if somebody's not managing to get it in the first 2 feet of that 20-foot setback, there might be an opportunity along the side property line that extends to the front property line. Just wanted to call that out if that's something to noodle.
Go ahead. You still have the floor.
So I was thinking, again, I'm not familiar enough with all the various types of equipment and what the issues might be, but I had the specific thought about the EVSE with respect to the front yard setback. And it seems because of the, nature of how it's used, as well as it's not really noise producing in the same way that other things might be. So in talking about potential relaxation of the front yard issue, are we talking about it for everything or just the electric vehicle service equipment?
The ordinance is drafted specifically for the charging for the vehicles as well as the
storage,
the battery storage. Yeah, ESS.
Okay.
We call that, and the bollard and that kind of thing.
So with respect to allowing further encroachment into the front yard setback, I think where I stand right now, I certainly would love to hear what the other commissioners think, is that I think that the 2-yard encroachment is probably appropriate, at least for now, based on everything I know for the batteries, but that we might, 2 feet, I think. Did I say yard? Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. 2 feet. But then I would definitely think it might be appropriate to relax further for EVSC specifically. I think the side yard is a great idea because many driveways do kind of go along the side yard. But I don't know if that's sufficient. There may be other situations where the driveway is not along the side yard. So I'd be curious to hear what other people think.
Vice Chair Suma?
I was wondering if, in general, I'd like to say a couple of things, and that is that I do think it would be, member of the public, Mr. Hitchings, mentioned that some of these devices, some of this electric equipment cannot be housed or insulated, and it might be more clear to specify that in the changes on pages 24 and 25 and elsewhere, just to make it clear that some don't. I think that was a good idea. And I also think his second point in his final email regarding this issue, clarifying that it can go on either side of the car would be useful. And I'm also wondering, I believe we have a standard of always describing for side-facing homes in Palo Alto. I think we have a standard of describing the front, regardless of where the front door may be, as the short side of the lot. Am I getting that right? Yes?
Yes, I'll show the definition for that.
That's okay. I mean, if others would like to see it, it's fine. But maybe we could solve this problem for all side-facing houses by changing that rule, because I happen to know Mr. Hitchings' house, and his front is clearly the long side of his lot, and that would solve his problems. So there could maybe be a provision here for the purposes of allowing this electrical equipment, which we prefer over the existing gas such, that people can choose the side that is the front. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? And I'm not suggesting we do it for every reason, but maybe for the purposes of this, it would really solve that problem for people with side-facing houses. So I don't know if my colleagues are interested in that.
Commissioner Heckman?
I wasn't raising my hand to answer that question, but let's let any commissioner that wants to respond to Vice Chair Suma's question, go ahead.
Okay, your light was on, so that's what I called. But I would concur with that, consistent with the comments that I made earlier. We need to make some exceptions for the purpose of electrification. And I think both of those make some sense.
Yeah, and I was also thinking,
But I agree
Oh,
with you
sorry.
that we don't necessarily have to change it for everything.
Yeah.
Just change it in this case for allowing electrification. And I like the car thing too, because the other thing that we've been trying to focus on in this whole issue of rehabbing is that older homes have a lot of considerations that we can't build from scratch. And for example, Mr. Hitchings' garage, he can still put it on one side rather than the other. So why would we say you can't do anything? So I like those.
and another idea I have had for fixing the fourplex that I spoke about down the block for me would be, because it doesn't have a 20-foot setback, nor does my house, but then maybe we want to allow it to be within 2 feet of where the building ends, actually. Which would put it, I bet these are about 10 feet long and they take the whole width of that lot, if you know what I mean. So it might be reasonable then to allow them in the first 2 feet where the building ends. Also, I don't know if that would work, but maybe staff could think about that as another potential solution for those non-conforming situations. Because that's kind of what the 20-foot setback, that's where it puts it anyway, within 2 feet of the building, pretty much. And then I wanted to ask up at the top of 24 and 25, which is the changes to low density and R1, and it's the same language, and air conditioners and pool equipment has been crossed off. So I just wasn't sure from reading it what that meant about where those things are allowed. But maybe I'm misunderstanding it. So that's just a question.
Trying to catch up with my method of using the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Attorney Yang has popped up.
I can speak to that.
Thank you.
It's just because some pool equipment or air conditioners could also be electric. And so we just wanted to, since this list that had said air conditioners, pool equipment, gas powered generators, commercial kitchen fans, it's just a list of examples. We didn't want people to be confused if they had, electric pool equipment. Can that be in the side yard or not?
Okay, thank you for that. I was just a little confused. So, so I think I will let my colleagues respond.
Commissioner Heckman? No?
Sure. If I'm understanding Vice Chair Suma's point, it's really having staff craft a way when we're talking about this equipment to recognize those situations where the front of the house, as it's oriented by reference to its front door, doesn't match our definition of rather than, and not all houses, a lot of, in fact, a number of houses, when you go to the front door, you're not at the front of the house, you're on the side of the house. And so are we wanting the equipment to be on that side of the house?
We define the front as the short side of the lot, as confirmed by Ms. French. In fact, and mine's the same, my front door is on the long side of my lot. And it has to do with, it's probably a problem that older houses have. And I think in Mr. Hitchings' case, he would be able to do what he wanted to and would already have done it and not put his project to electrify his whole home on hold had that orientation been different. So just for the purposes of incentivizing electrification projects like his, I think we could allow them to change, the homeowner to change that designation.
So where is it that in an example like his, the equipment wants to go? Where is it? Is it?
I think he's asking if the long facing is you use it as your front door. Do we want electrical equipment in the theoretical front yard? Or does it have to then be in the back? So we would have to specify that it was in a side yard that was not the front facing side. Is that kind of where you're going?
Yeah, I mean, assuming, and I'm sorry, we're just using Mr. Hitchens as an example. There are lots of homes, I think, of those dimensions, right? So it's a rectangle. The house is a rectangle. It's long, right? From it's the short side is on the street, say, and the long side has the front door.
Long side is on the street also.
It's corner lot.
Oh, okay, that's even messier. Okay, so, but it's helpful. So can somebody, I'm trying to understand in that configuration, where is it that the equipment wants to go, but, you know, the owner would like the equipment to go, that it can't go?
So I think the equipment can't go behind the garage in this case, because the garage is considered the rear, but it's really the side. It's a very normal kind of situation.
I think the answer is the two smaller parts of the rectangle is where it could go. Because it wouldn't go in the front facing side and it probably wouldn't go in the back side, but it could go in either one of the short facing rectangles, which in our current code is the front and the backyard.
Okay, and is that the result we want, that in that scenario it can only go on the two short sides, or do we also want it to go on one or the other of the long sides? Where are we trying to take this ordinance?
Well, I don't know exactly, because corner lots are different, and even some side facing houses are not corner lots. But I just think that maybe that might give more flexibility in this situation. And I don't even know if, I don't know that all garages are 20 feet back when they're side by side to the front door. So it just, it creates a difficulty in this situation. And I think for other, I don't know how many there are, so maybe it's a small problem, but I was just thinking of creative ways to address it. I don't know where I'd put such things on my lot. My house, which was built before there were paved streets, sits in one corner, very close to the street. I don't have a garage. And so it's hard to know. It would be hard for me to read this and find a way, read this ordinance and know where I would be able to put that charging equipment so I could use it. And it's just for the charging equipment and the battery, because it's the thing the car has to use. It wouldn't, but
we're moving toward a motion. And if the motion is to include this concept, how are we going to give staff enough of a description so that they know what we want? Because I don't yet understand that.
Well, I think
Commissioner Chang has an idea.
Okay. I will just attempt to start. Okay, so one suggestion would be to, so rather than saying only 2 feet into the front yard setback, we would say the side yards would be allowed. So that's part one for EVSE. A second part would be that instead of saying just 2 feet into the front yard setback, we would say 2 feet from where, so we would say 2 feet into the front yard setback, or 2 feet in front of the house if the front of the house is within the front yard setback. Now I need your help to make it legal speak. Yes.
May I jump in? Okay, so one thing is to, again, remind that we have this draft ordinance set up so that they can encroach 10 feet into the street side setback. So recall that. So the street side is the long, on a corner lot, the long property line. And so we allow a 10-foot encroachment into that, which is more than a 2-foot encroachment. And the side yard is 16 feet. So they're getting to 14 feet from that street side, yes. So in Mr. Hitchings' case, that's his front door. So he could put it in that street side setback up to, 14, 10 feet into the 16 foot. So it would be, leaving 10 feet on the table. So 6 feet encroachment into that street side setback on that side of the corner lot, if that makes any sense. Yes. So let's see, we have a corner lot up here earlier. Okay, so in this case, we have a 16-foot street side setback, and the ordinance that's before you enables encroachment into that street side setback. The ordinance before you also has a 2-foot encroachment into the front setback of a corner lot here. So here it would be, now another wrinkle which I thought of as you were talking about this is we do have contextual setback homes that are 30 feet back. So this is where this concept of 2 feet in front of the front wall, starts to have another dimension as well.
Yeah, no, that's where I was saying we stick with the 2 feet rule unless the 2 feet, it's like whichever is closer to the boundary of, yes. So in the case of 30 foot.
So in the case of a 30-foot contextual setback, it would be 2 feet forward of that 30 feet, assuming that's where the front of the house is, or yeah. And then on the street side yard, if the house is at 14 feet instead of 16, as it says you're supposed to be here, then you would say, it's okay, go
2 more.
2 more instead of what the ordinance is saying, which is you can go even farther than that.
Well, so I don't think I understood the 10 feet part.
Okay, let's go to that piece.
Where is that again in the?
We'll go to the code there. Okay, because this is what happened at the ADU session with Planning Commission, a minimum 10-foot street side yard setback. So in other words, that 16 foot is cut down to 10 feet in the draft ordinance. So if you are saying 2 feet in front of a 16 foot, then it's not going to be as lenient as this, right?
So we just need to write it so it's the most lenient possible. That would be the intent. I don't know how to actually do it with the language, but that's the intent.
I have a question. Could we say something sort of general, like when the orientation of a corner lot would better serve electrification by switching the orientation for both the neighbors and the owner to let them do it? Because I think that's what I heard from poor Mr. Hitchings, who's had his name used so many times this evening, is that he had it all worked out perfectly for him and to be less intrusive for his neighbors, but it doesn't work because where the front of his yard is. So if it was something that was just that simple, and not to change it across the board, but just for these situations, I don't know if that, I mean, I don't write legal code, but that the concept would be when it's better for the parcel owner and the neighbors.
We could do that and have Council Yang just work on the wording of it.
Yeah.
Director Late, you had a comment?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I appreciate that we have an example that we're citing. Knows this, but for the benefit of the public that may be watching us now or in the future, we don't draft our, this is intended to apply throughout the district. And so we want to be mindful that we're not just cultivating something for a single property. I also don't really understand, the issue fully. We're already talking about street yards and corner street yards as allowing for encroachments into these areas. The idea that I'm worried about some of the language that I'm hearing for letting the owner decide, or when it's better for the property owner and the neighbor. And those are so subjective. statements that we really need to avoid having anything about this being subjective. I mean, this needs to be like clear standards. And so for the, and maybe just a side procedural note, it looks like Commissioner Templeton had stepped away. Is she out of the?
That's correct. That's correct. She became ill and left.
Okay, so for our transcriptionist, just to note that.
Yes, thank you.
We lost one of our commissioners. Okay. I think as I'm hearing Commissioner Chang's comments and Vice Chair Suma, I guess what I'm left with is I'm trying to understand if there is and given the variability of buildings on lots, non-conforming or greater setbacks than, there's so many different scenarios. Is there a threshold from a property line, say a front property line or a corner street property line, that the commission thinks we should be measuring and I'm just speaking about electric vehicle, charging, stations right now. We should be measuring from that property line at the street and saying no closer than 10 feet to the street, and then it really doesn't matter where the house is located, where the garage is located, or how much you're encroaching into a contextual setback or not. If the commission can get to a place of, well, we don't generally want to see these things right at the property line or 10 feet back or something like that, that might be a better standard. And then presumably that would address the corner lot situation and the other more traditional configuration. So unless I'm missing something in the example that's been cited, I would suggest maybe we shift that focus to measure from the property line itself and maybe lose this reference to the front of the facade of the building for the chargers.
Vice Chair Suma, does that seem to work?
I think so. I'm not 100% sure. I would not recommend ever, writing a law just to solve one person's problem. But I just worry about all the non-conforming lots they might feel when they read this, they didn't have a way to do this. That's all. So
Commissioner Chang, did you have any comment on this?
So I think that strategy that Director Late suggested is a good one. I just don't know where, I'd be curious to hear where other commissioners think, what would be too close? Where would that boundary be? What's the length of a car? Length of the garage is 18 feet, but the length of a car is, I don't know, 10 maybe? But I could see a situation where, I don't know, maybe it's 10 feet, but then for the side yard, it could be even closer. I just want to be flexible here.
Commissioner Raphael, you've been patient. Do you want to comment on this piece?
Let's go to
Mike.
We really have two things going on. One is the corner lot thing and the other is the front, the point of about the EVSE in the front yard. So right now we're going to the we bounce back to the EVSE. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to slide 18.
I was having a little fun trying to translate that concept of 10 foot to the street. Slide 18.
Okay, and so in this case, I can envision, say, the driveway on the left-hand side going into the garage. And if you have a garage, you probably want the charging station inside the garage. So it's probably not a big hardship. But we talked earlier about the ADU conversion. This might be a double garage that now is an ADU and there's no garage. We said there that there'd be a legal parking, in fact, 2 legal parking spots in front of the house where the driveway would have been if that was a garage. In that case, even having it on the side yard may not be sufficient because you may want it in the front of the house between the 2 cars. So each of the cars can have equal access to the charging station. So I would think that you would want at least a few feet in front of the house where you could put a charger. The other option would be on the left-hand side, but even on the left-hand side of the front yard, that's still part of the front setback, right?
It is as described and defined in our code, but this ordinance for specific purpose of electrification equipment could enable, a language that talks about the front yard where it touches an interior side property line or something, and having that be an option in that location, unless you're talking about in the center of that front yard where I'm moving the cursor.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that making an exception, like Commissioner Chang was saying, is 2 feet into the setback or 2 feet further from the house. Either both of those would give you a reasonable spot to put the charger. I mean, the other approach would be to say, if it's a legal parking spot, anywhere within 2 feet of that legal parking spot. So if it's that legal parking spot is along the edge, you could put it anywhere along there. And most people are not going to want to put this in the middle of their yard, make it look ugly. So I suspect that people will manage their aesthetics just as well as we can.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, at minimum, I think we should have 2 feet in front of the house and maybe along the sides too. But I don't know how to verbalize that.
Commissioner Heckman? Your light's still on?
Can we go back to the slide that showed, I think the slide that showed the corner lot also showed an interior lot next to it. So that's kind of helpful because we can, yeah, okay. So let me start, I want to start kind of where staff wrote the ordinance right now, the draft. And so let me just start with the interior lot, right? So what the draft ordinance in front of us, in the front yard, that's showing, I think, a 20-foot setback. And the draft ordinance says 2 feet, right? On the side yard, I think the draft ordinance is saying you can get to within 3 feet, right? Encroach up to 3 feet from that side property line. Rear yard, a little less clear. Is that 3 feet from the rear?
Correct.
Okay, so anywhere in your backyard up to 3 feet from the back. And then the other side yard, 3 feet from the property line, right? So it's basically a 3-foot perimeter around 3 sides of the house, 2 feet on the front. And so it seems like in the interior lot, the 3 foot around the perimeter other than the front, I'm not hearing anybody talk about that. So it seems like we're all pretty comfortable with that concept. And it's just here in this interior lot front yard, maybe we need more flexibility than 2 feet. And so one question I had, and just remind me, can I build an ADU in any part of that 20-foot front yard setback?
You can build the state mandated size, the 800 square foot, in the front yard, only if it's infeasible to build it in a more complying manner, is my understanding.
All right, so and I don't think we should try to legislate for that possibility because that's going to be the exception rather than rule. Okay, so even the ADU is supposed to respect that 20 feet. And so I guess I'm comfortable, with a little bit longer than a 2-foot incursion into that front yard area. I do think that, like a freestanding charging station, I want to say it's an eyesore, but it's noticeable. It's not the prettiest part of the house. And I would like that structure to be tucked closer to the house. So as I drive by it, it's not like a sculpture in the middle of the driveway, but rather I kind of lose it looking at the house and behind it. So I wouldn't want to allow it to push too far forward toward the street. But if we think, another, I don't think another foot or two would vastly affect that. And if it would create some more flexibility, then maybe that's, worthwhile. So that's the interior lot. Let's go to the corner lot now. All right, so we've got on the interior side, it's 3 feet. I don't think we have an issue with that. The rear is 3 feet. The street side, what they call the street side yard, which is a 16-foot requirement, the encroachment can be 6 feet into that, right? Consistent with what we did on the ADUs. All right, and so in an example where a person's front door happens to be on what we call the street side yard setback, they still have basically 6 feet to play with for equipment along what that person would consider the front of their house and a 10-foot setback. And then, but you would think perhaps that person would prefer not to have their equipment along what they view as the front of their house. They'd rather have it along what's called here the front yard, but as we were talking about, it only has a 2-foot allowance there. If we push that to 4 in both of those front yard instances, then it gives that person who has that, the opportunity at least to push that equipment so it's not on what they consider the front of their house. It's on the side of their house, which happens to be in the front yard. And again, it could be 4 feet from the wall. So it seems like, and then they have the same requirements for the interior side and the rear that everybody else does. So it seems to me that could provide a little more flexibility in both an interior lot and a corner lot if we allow that incursion in the front yard in both instances to be, say, 4 feet instead of 2. Is that, am I getting at the issue? Am I understanding where the pinch point was?
Commissioner Chang?
Yes, I think you are partially.
Okay.
But there's a situation where, okay, like where Commissioner Rectal was headed with, this is a legal parking space and it might be within the first 10 feet from the sidewalk, right? But that is just where the legal parking space is. Then we need to be able to allow for a charger there, I think. Well, this is what I was saying. I understand what your point was about. We don't want like a sculpture sitting in the middle. But could we, if it's along a side fence, I think it'd be a lot less objectionable, right? There's already a fence there. And that seems like it might be a logical place for it to be. In addition, many driveways go along the fence. And so I would suggest everything that you said. And in addition to that, add, I need somebody else's opinion here, but I think you can go pretty close to the street with respect to the side yard. It's pretty close to the sidewalk, like to the property line.
Okay, so let me ask a question. This concept of I've got a legal parking space that's the first 10 feet from the street. I'm trying to understand, how is that possible? I mean, I can't have my structure can't be closer than 20 feet to the street. That was, that's how it was built, right? And then I had a garage, but I converted it to an ADU. So I should have a 20-foot long driveway apron. Now, if I choose to tear out the 10 feet of that apron closest to the building and plant shrubs, so now I only have a 10-foot driveway apron, then I hit shrubs, then the building. Well, I think that's on me. And I don't think that I get to move the charging station up closer to the street because of that. So, and we know that the city won't allow anybody to put a structure in that 20 feet because it's in the setback. So I'm not understanding a situation where the legal parking space is only 10 feet from the street unless it was, the property owner's landscape choice. Is there a scenario I'm not thinking about?
I think I'm thinking of non-conforming buildings that are, and I was thinking of a specific building in my neighborhood. It's a fourplex, 2 stories, and it's about 10 feet from the sidewalk, and the entire width of the lot is 3 parking spots. So it doesn't even have 4 parking spots, 1 for each unit. They've just added 2 ADUs, or in the process of adding 2 ADUs in back. And the only way they could have electrical charging off the street is to have it in that So that, and I don't know how important it is to, and I don't want to distract conversation by specific examples. I was just trying to think of a general way to let a building like that electrify.
Right.
And
okay, so that we can address, right?
Yeah.
We can say something like, it's 4 feet from the building, or what I'm trying to think of is in a situation like yours, right, where they could have 2 feet, right? It's only the structure is built and it's only 10 feet from the street, right? So in that scenario, they need to be able to do it within. That's where we should have 2 feet. In a situation, right? And so we got to figure out is whether it's it's one of these lesser of kinds of things.
Exactly.
But I think that's the concept is if it's a 20-foot setback, we're talking about really 16 feet from the property line or 2 feet from the edge of the building, whichever is less. Right. I think I think that catches it. 16 feet from the property line. Do we have uniform 20-foot setback? Not really.
Yeah, if I might, that we do have that contextual base, and we do have others. One way to be simplest of all is, I think, would be to say from a street frontage property line, you have to be at least 10 feet from that street frontage property line, regardless of what the corner lot, which street side. You don't have to say if it's just always 10 feet, unless the building is 10 feet or closer to that street line, in which case you can have 2 feet in front of the building where it is. And it might be 4 feet from the property line.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I also, I mean, aesthetically, they're not very attractive. They're very industrial looking, but people have them right now. They park their cars tandem in their, in driveways, and they have 2, and one is about 5 feet currently, I can think of, from the sidewalk. So I agree with you, but I think if we are wanting to encourage this, we need to find a solution to grandfather situations that don't have a 20-foot setback.
Yeah, so I like the way that Ms. French just explained it. I'd be supportive of that concept, which gives people in that kind of situation a narrower band to work in, 2 feet, but it gives them something even though they're only 10 feet from the street. So I like that approach.
Director Late, does that seem acceptable?
Yeah, I mean, I got confused on the last part there, but I think the concept is one that we could certainly work with. 4-foot encroachment into a compliant front or corner side yard, and no more than 2-foot encroachment into for a property that may have a non-conforming front or side yard.
No, Amy, go ahead.
Director Late, I think the latest seemed to garner support was that we would say whenever you have a street frontage, you could be 10 feet from that street frontage, regardless of whether you call it the front or the street side. It's always 10 feet minimum setback, unless you have a building that has a non-conforming setback closer than 10 feet. In which case, then they're saying allow a 2-foot encroachment in front of that non-complying building frontage.
So in a otherwise conforming condition for that interior lot, commissioners, are you saying allow a 10-foot? Because that's different than the 2 and different than Commissioner Heckman's 4. Now we're going to 10.
So as I think through that's not really the concept I was trying to capture. I have a 20-foot driveway, I think. And so that would be me putting my charger halfway between the garage door and the street. And again, that's kind of out there and exposed. And there's no reason for me to need to do that. I think I could, put it 4 feet from the garage door, 16 feet from the street, and it's a little more hidden by the garage. So
I would think most people would want it in their garage, should they be fortunate enough to have a garage.
yeah, or not have
So
it filled
I'm just
with
trying to think of those other grandfathered
Right, so I
buildings.
think
And I don't have the language, but I just tried to identify the problem. And yeah. And separate from that, I still do have an interest on corner lots allow, if the configuration of the electrical equipment is better, allowing them to switch. I've never understood that rule exactly. And I'm only recommending doing it for electrical equipment purposes if the configuration works out better. Because really the backyard is the main backyard of a house like that the house can be very close to the long side of the lot, the parcel. And so the big backyard is behind on the other long side, and it's not where the equipment wants to be placed by corner lot owners. So are any of my colleagues still interested in that concept?
Did we solve this first complex problem?
well,
Are we
I've got a plan for a motion that I can make on, that would cover that issue.
Okay, then let's go ahead and discuss this in tandem. Vice Chair Suma's comments. Commissioner Chang?
Can I just go back to the EVSE question really quickly? So Commissioner Heckman, you're saying that in your case, you see no need to put an EVSE in the middle of your front yard setback. And I think that's right. You would never do it. But another person in a different situation might. I think that Commissioner Rechthal's comment about people are going to try and put this, they're not attractive. So people are going to try and put them in the best place according to their needs, right? So cars, for example, are parked tandem, which I've definitely seen, and you want 2 units in order to allow them to both charge overnight. I could see the need for that. And so I would want to allow that flexibility, but recognizing that we don't want them any closer than, say, 10 feet to the front property line. But there may be a need, right? Especially with all these ADUs coming in and long driveways and that kind of a thing. So that was my thought there, where I think that allowing it doesn't mean that people aren't going to do it unless there's some need to do it, is what I think. But I would love to hear your perspective on that. With respect to Commissioner Suma's idea, are you just suggesting for the purposes of EVSE, so that there's no kind of legal determination of better, but just for the purposes of not EVSE, for electrification equipment, to let owners in corner lots choose which is their front and which is their side? We're just gonna blanket allow that permission for corner lot houses. Just because, assuming again that people are going to make like the reasonable decision. And the exception is only granted, or this is only with respect to electrification equipment.
Yes, for placement of electrical.
I think that also may make sense.
Well, but Director Lay was talking about that as a completely subjective standard, which is what we're trying to get away from.
No, I'm not suggesting that it's subjective. I'm suggesting that every single corner lot house gets to decide which is the front, which is the side with respect to the electrification equipment.
But the setbacks would have to apply. The setbacks that we're just talking about.
Yes, you would. So I'm owner number 1 on this corner lot, and it's a typical corner lot where the short side is where my front door is, and therefore I will reasonably want to go with the applicable setbacks as defined as proposed in this ordinance. But if for some reason I wanted to flip it, I would be allowed to. Nobody would get in my way. And I think that would be okay.
Director Late, you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm being, I'm not tracking. We just talked about putting the same standard for corner street yards as a front yard setback. What is gained by?
So we were talking about EVSE specifically, and
Yep.
with EVSE specifically, we would just have, my proposal would be the 10 feet, right? Except for houses that are non-conforming where where the building is in the 10 feet, then we would do 2. But with respect to all the other electrification equipment,
So batteries, heat pump water heaters.
pool heaters or whatever those may be. That's where the street side definition versus the side, so the front versus the side definition may have an impact on the owner, right? Because
So,
what they define as their backyard is different.
And so you'd want to create an opportunity for those to encroach into the corner street yard more.
Correct.
You want a heat pump water heater or somebody's pool equipment to be visible from the street corner. And be able
No.
to project.
So many people have their yards completely fenced, right? So they can't put it in they're still
That's true.
required.
There would be some fencing potentially.
Right. They're still required to meet these setbacks. It's just a question of whether it's the 16 versus the 20 on which side.
So we don't allow that right now into the front yard setback.
Right, but you do allow it into the side, and the side right now is being determined by whichever is shorter on the lot.
We do not allow it into the side right
don't?
now. The
Okay.
new draft ordinance is proposing that we allow it into the street side setback.
Well, so yes, right. So the new ordinance is proposing that we allow it into the street side setback, but for some corner lot houses, that is not the street side setback for them. That's their front, right? So I'm just saying that allow a corner lot owner to decide which is the street side and which is the front side with respect to the installation of electrification equipment. Am I being clear? If somebody has a better way of saying this, please go ahead.
I have an idea, perhaps. We have the 10-foot that's already in the ordinance, if people are okay with that, for the street side setback. For the street side setback. For the front, we're saying 2 feet. I think the problem is in wanting that front, whether it's the front or the, anyways, to get up to that 10 feet, just like just like we're giving for the street side yard, only the problem is it's hanging out in the front yard too far forward. But if it were perhaps closer to the side property line, in the front yard, 10 feet back, and perhaps had some kind of screening, whether it's fencing.
We need one or more whiteboards to do this.
Right?
This is very confusing. When you, in your discussion, when you were just
let
talking
me
about the front,
put it on.
just tell me what your definition of front is.
I'm showing
The
you
city's front?
on the screen. The front
Or-
yard here is the front yard, and but if you were, if per Commissioner
address-
Heckman's
I ju-
idea was
no.
to put it 10 feet in the front yard, but that's
Wait, we need
feeling.
to slow down here.
Yeah.
Front yard means front yard according to the city, because that's where the address is? Is that what you're saying?
That's the shortest, if we're talking about a corner lot, it's the
Yeah.
shortest frontage of a corner lot.
Right, and so that's the city's definition of front yard,
Correct.
but the homeowner would say the front yard is the long face.
Sure. Over here, they get to
Just
put
getting our
it.
definition straight,
Yeah,
that's all I'm
yeah.
gonna do.
Over here on the street side yard, they get to put it 6 feet into this setback. So it's 10 feet away from the street. On the front yard here, they can only put it 2 feet according to the draft ordinance we're putting in front of you. If we want to allow them closer than 2 feet in this scenario, because perhaps as Vice Chair Suma noted, there's properties that come to 10 feet from the front yard, and maybe we want them 2 feet into that and further, so 8 feet from the, you could say, no, just for ease, never closer than 10 feet unless there's a building sitting at 10 feet. And then if you wanted to, if 10 feet makes you uncomfortable, when we have a 20-foot, you could have them go closer to the sideline where there might be fencing and screening. So it doesn't hang out there halfway into the 20-foot.
So I want to just repeat and capture what Vice Chair Suma is saying. Is that correct? What is the city definition of front is where you want to be able to put that you want the
Now, I think the problem for
homeowner to do?
I think the problem for corner lots is that they want to put the equipment where they don't see it in their yard, which may be behind their garage. And because of the orientation on the street, they can't put it where they would most like to. But
So in this diagram, you would say that they could put it in the city defined front yard, which is their side yard. Right? That's what you're saying. You just want to add that as an option.
not exactly what I'm saying.
Well, you said they would have a choice to put it there or where? Any of the four sides?
I think that corner lots sometimes have different problems. And I think I was just trying to think of a way to make it possible for a corner lot to designate their actual front.
I'm just asking a clarification question. Where do you want them to be able to put electronic equipment in this diagram? All four sides of the house, or the definition by the city that this is the front and or the actual front? Where do you want this thing to end up in terms of, I said earlier, I have one of those. So can I put my electrical equipment anywhere if we take your amendment?
No, I don't think so. I think it just, it acknowledges that the real front of the house is the front. And so it.
Down here, the narrow part?
No, the long side.
Okay, so I just keep coming back to where is it okay if we take your amendment for people to put electrical equipment?
It would be a little bit different because the front would now be what's currently the side.
So it could go in the front. It's one place it could go.
It could go in the front the same way anybody else can go in the front, which is not the EVSE equipment. We don't want really close, but that's a separate issue because.
But you said you want to give them a choice. So is the other choice, I'm trying to narrow it down, is it just to the city defined front yard space?
Yes.
So those are the two places that the equipment could go?
No, they could put it 3 feet, within 2 feet of the property line,
All four sides of the house?
not the front,
Not this front or this front?
the new front. This is maybe too complicated.
Well, there's a front defined by the city and there's a front yard that people think is their front yard. I'm just trying to use the visual to say, where could this person end up putting the equipment?
They could end up putting it behind their garage, which is not really pictured here because the garage, and this is probably an older house issue also, because the garages are often and still are sometimes right on the property line. So they would want to tuck or very close to the property line, which is not really their rear yard because it's their side yard because their house actually faces the other way. That's the only problem I'm trying to fix, but I feel like
I think, so where you're suggesting is in this diagram with the corner lot, you're suggesting that the garage would be kind of where nope. If the front of,
So I think everybody is going to want to put their charging equipment, everybody who uses their garage for parking cars, those few will want to put their charging equipment inside their garage. And then I think they will want to tuck their electrical equipment in places that that they don't see in the main part of their yard. And the main part of their yard may be behind their house, which is not the same as this picture because it's a corner lot and the house is oriented differently, but the city defines it this way. And it's just a choice about where giving people with corner lots the ability to orient electrical equipment in a way that serves their particular parcel's needs because it's sideways.
I'm just going to try it one more time. Now what I heard you say is that where she has the cursor right now on the map is back the city definition of backyard, which is probably where the garage is. So you're saying that should be a place they should be able to put electronic equipment, right? Because that's the back of the house.
Okay. So I think we're set. If you look at packet page 17, we're proposing that they can go up to 10 feet from the street side property line on corner lots. Okay. And there's two ways to consider this: how far from the street side property line and how far from the house. To me, a reasonable, I mean, these units are small. So if you had said you could do it within 4 feet of the house and up to 10 feet from the street, which either those two lines, which either is closer to the street, right? Then you can go within 10 feet of the property line. But if you have 12 feet between your house and the property line, then you can go 4 feet from your house, which is 8 feet from the property line. Right? Because if you want to give them at least 4 feet on that side property for their station.
Let's get the comment from Director Light, if we can.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So I think this has been an interesting conversation, and it highlights, some of the challenges with zoning in general, right? Because we're all thinking of different scenarios in which, we're trying to apply the standards. And so zoning inherently is going to create some conflicts when we apply it to a particular parcel. But I think it also highlights an interesting opportunity that Commissioner Templeton had raised about the edge cases. And I've had a chance with sort of think about that a little bit further. And this may address Commissioner or Vice Chair Suma's question about wanting to get some additional flexibility, as well as Commissioner Chang's comment about certain scenarios. And we have a provision of our code which is called a home improvement exemption. I want to thank Amy for flagging this as a possibility. A home improvement exception is a real low level sort of discretionary review. It's got a lot of restrictions on how it can be applied. Staff processes it administratively. There's like some 14 different scenarios in which this could apply for really extraordinarily modest, adjustments to homes to deal with these non-conforming situations. And we could, with the Commission's direction this evening, amend that chapter of the code. I've checked with Albert, and he believes that you're appropriately agendized for that action. You could ask us to add a provision to the home improvement exceptions that would allow the director to approve different placement of electrification equipment on a lot based on various criteria that you could either direct us to come up with, or if you have some guidance, you can give us that today. I think the existing sort of findings for that are probably sufficient for us just to even add a line item on that. And then that will allow us to sort of consider the one-off cases. But then I would suggest we kind of stick to the ordinance that's been presented to you, with the exception that for electric vehicle charging stations, we follow along what Commissioner Heckman was offering, which was allow for the chargers, allow a 4-foot encroachment into the front and corner street side yards into those required setbacks, or a 2-foot projection from the face of the building, if that building happens to encroach into that required yard. And everything else stay the same, but add this provision that we can make some changes if the conditions are appropriate under the home improvement exception. So that's what I wanted to offer, Chair. Thank you.
Commissioner Heckman has been patient.
So I was thinking of a different wise comment that Commissioner Templeton made, that maybe, we adopt the ordinance and we revisit in a year to see how it's working. Because I do think that we should be legislating for the rule rather than the exception. And so the alternative I had to what Director Late was just saying is, let's legislate for the rule now, and let's see in the coming year after this is adopted, how many, if any, of these problem cases come in where they just can't fit. Because then maybe we can find a way to adjust. But I think Director Late's suggestion gets at that. My concern is you can go make that adjustment to that other ordinance, or is that going to slow this whole process down while we, go study that? But if we can get it done with a motion tonight, then I'm okay with that solution. I did want to clarify that, again, what staff's proposing is 6-foot encroachment into the street side setback on a corner lot. And I'm not suggesting we touch that. That's a very good, generous encroachment. And you can use it if that's the front of your house on the corner or what you consider the side of your house. Either way, it's there. And I think by providing 4 feet on what the city considers the front yard setback, now you've got that option too. And of course, you can go around the interior side up to 3 feet from the fence, and you can use your whole backyard up to 3 feet from the fence. So I think I think we have, when we do that, we provide corner lot owners a reasonable set of choices that they can use without having to designate which is the front yard, because again, it's really at that point the difference between, do you want 6 feet over here or 4 feet over here? Because I'm not proposing we flip those numbers and say, well, if you think that what the city calls your front yard is your side yard, then you get 6 feet there. I'm not proposing that we do that. I think that, you have 4 feet on that side, which will incidentally kind of match everyone else down that street, who's facing that street. And that's, one of the things that we think about is the kind of uniformity, not just at the corner, but where the corner wraps to. So I'm ready to try a motion that I think we're going to have to build by consensus if everyone's ready to start it, for me to start it. Yeah,
I think you should do that. And I think, Director Late gave us sort of an out clause there that might get us the best of both worlds. And I don't think that, I didn't hear him say this was going to hold up the motion, particularly since we already connected with council on it.
Yeah.
So go for it.
All right. So before I do, let me just ask Director Late to remind, if I'm going to include that in my motion, what's the ordinance that you're going to adjust to add I'm not asking for the language of just the reference you made. It's the home improvement.
It's on the screen.
Oh, there we go. Home improvement exceptions.
And this is applicable to the residential, R1, low residential as well. And these are so it's 18, 12, 120. And there are certain limits that are enumerated there.
Okay. All right. And what we're talking about is just to
yeah.
Try to understand.
Amy, I'm sorry. Can you scroll up, Amy?
Yep.
There'd be two things, Chair Heckman, that we would, or Commissioner Heckman, that we would do. One is we would modify probably the purpose section to speak to electrification. And then we would add a number, probably replace the existing 15 with a new number and slide 15 to become new 16. But I think that's all the changes we would need to make, and would welcome Albert Yang to offer any additional perspective if he thought that was necessary.
No, I guess I would just say, I don't think we need the PTC's motion to be, particularly specific or directive on this point, just to say, expand the home improvement exception process to cover electrification equipment.
And is the concept that expansion would cover all electrification equipment or just the EVSAs?
My understanding from the commission discussion is that it would be all electrification.
Okay. All right. So, So before I wade into the motion, there are a couple things I won't include in the motion, just so everybody knows up front. One is this comment that I waded into about the 6 dB ambient increase versus the 60 versus 66. I didn't hear any traction on that issue from the commission, so I'm not going to be including that. Also, the capitalization of electrification equipment, I'm just going to leave that to staff to look at and fix. I don't think that needs to be part of the motion. All right. So with that, let's see if I can do this. I will move that the PTC recommend to the City Council the staff recommendation with the following modifications. First, that the setback for specifically for EVSAs be 4 feet for lots, a 4-foot encroachment into the front yard setback for lots with a conforming front yard setback, and 2 feet into the front yard setback for lots with a non-conforming front yard setback. So that would be 2 feet from the structure for those non-conforming situations. Next, that the city modify the home improvement exception, section 18.12.120, to include electrification equipment. And third, that for clarification of the ordinances that are the subject of our recommendation tonight, that that we add the following clause at the end of 18.10040H3, 18.10.040L3, and 18.13.040B1D. And that language is after the word insulation, comma, due to noise generation below applicable maximums. So that's the
Well
motion.
done. Well done. How about a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Rupavar? Okay. We still have some comment on the motion then? Go ahead.
May I just state that there are 2 sections, there's 2 chapters. There's another 1810 HIE chapter, which applies to low density residential as well as 1812. So let me give you the opportunity to cite that one as well, Chair, Commissioner. It is 1810 110. That's the home improvement exception section of chapter 1810 for low density residential.
Then the motion should reference that modification to both 1812.120 and 1810.110. Thank you, Ms. French.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Commissioner Rectal, you still have comments?
Yeah, just a question about screening. Do we ever, because we're now talking about putting something on the side yard right by the sidewalk here. If for other equipment, do we require any screening on when stuff is outside of the side yards? Yeah, on corner lots, for example, or in front yards, do we require screening? Yeah. This is a question for staff.
I'm getting to the slide that talks about visual screening. It's slide 19. And we talk about not needing to, here, let me share my screen. In the draft ordinance, we specifically exempted residentially used EVSE and energy storage systems and associated bollards from the screening requirement.
Okay, so if I had a compressor there on the side yard of my corner lot, I would have to put up some type of screening then. It says shall be obscured from public view. And what's our definition of obscured from public view? Does that mean I can have a bush there? I can fence anything?
Yes, bush, fence, enclosure would all suffice to interrupt the view from, I guess, across the street is how this is reading, abutting opposite sidewalk.
Okay.
That's how the existing code reads.
Do we have experience requiring screening for other things?
I'm sure there is experience on staff, with the fences, typically a 6-foot fence would suffice.
Yeah.
Shrubs that grow taller would suffice.
I'm just worried about what kind of regulations, if someone wants to screen this with vegetation, what kind of requirements do we have on that vegetation?
There's nothing specific in our code as to the density of planting, the height of the vegetation, or whether it's, deciduous or evergreen or anything.
Yeah, exactly. And so do we have any experience requiring that for other things? Or is this something brand new? This is the first time we ever have screening on a residential.
There is certainly screening used in the individual review process for 2-story homes, but that's a discretionary application. These are not envisioned to be discretionary applications that have, quality control over what the screening is going to look like each and every time.
Okay. Then, I'm happy with screening. We'll see how that works. If there's issues, we'll revisit this, but. Okay.
Commissioner Chang?
So I had a question for Commissioner Heckman. You had mentioned that you were interested in a couple of the comments, a couple of the points in the public comment. And I wanted to make sure I'm now completely lost in terms of where we are, what's in the motion and what's not with respect to the public comment that was here in chambers. Do you think that, are they covered in, not at all, or?
Well, I didn't directly cover either of those. It may be that in expanding the front yard encroachment from 2 feet to 4 foot, we have provided more flexibility for the owner of a corner lot whose front door faces the street side. We've given them more flexibility to place an EVSE.
So that wasn't the one that I was asking about. Sorry, I wasn't clear. So earlier this evening, Commissioner Reckdahl had also mentioned something about an explicit carve out to indicate that certain types of electrical equipment should not be housed and insulated. But I think that's already addressed, correct? Elsewhere in the.
Well, yeah, it's in the section that in the section that I proposed a modification to, the director is going to cull a list of equipment that does not need housing and or insulation.
Great. Okay. And then the other one that I wanted to make sure was covered was I don't think that we have made any, the ordinance as written allows encroachment into a parking space for EVSE on either side of the car, either side of the parking space. Is that correct?
It's not specific,
It's
it's
not
just
specific.
Yeah.
reducing it by 18 inches.
So it's fine.
However that happens.
However that happens. Okay, great. So we're covered. Okay, I can support that, the motion. So that's it.
Any other comments, questions? Are we all clear what we're voting on? It was a long, well thought out motion, excuse me. All right, let's do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Chair Lowing,
Yes.
Commissioner Rectal,
Yes.
Commissioner Rupavar,
Yes.
Vice Chair Suma,
Yes.
and Commissioner Templeton left earlier, so motion carries 6-0.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting discussion. Cover a lot of area. And I hope it gave explicit direction to staff, and really appreciate the iteration with multiple staff members here to get us where we needed to go. Thanks very much for that. All right, we're going to move on to minutes now, 2 sets of minutes. First of all, October 26, 22 draft verbatim minutes.
Move approval is revised.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve revised draft verbatim minutes. Please call the roll unless there's any questions or recusals for absences.
Commissioner Rupavar,
Yes.
Commissioner Rectal,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Vice Chair Suma,
Yes.
Chair Lowing,
Yes.
motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. So we now move to November 16, 22 draft verbatim minutes.
Move approval is revised.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve November 16, 2022 draft verbatim minutes. Any questions or recusals? Otherwise, let's go for a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Rupavar,
I'll abstain. I don't think I was at the meeting.
Commissioner Rectal,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Vice Chair Suma,
Yes.
Chair Lowing,
Yes.
motion carries 5-1 with Commissioner Rupavar abstaining.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we're now just moving along to any commissioner questions, comments, or announcements or future agenda items in 2023. Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you. So in our staff report today on packet page 11, we have debuted our schedule for meetings in 2023. And I looked at that schedule and want to start this ball rolling by letting staff know and our clerk know that I will be absent for the meetings on April 26th, June 14th, and July 12th, and would not be participating in any of those meetings remotely, which is, we have this limited possible opportunity. So I just want to clarify that I won't be hosting a public meeting in a hotel in Nashville in April.
Okay. Vice Chair Suma.
Well, I just wanted to, I don't know if staff has anything to say before I make a little speech here, because it is your last meeting at the Planning Commission. You're moving up to the City Council, and I just wanted to acknowledge that and express my admiration and for you and your achievements, how much you've done for this city, and to congratulate you on your fabulous win in the election. And you will be very missed here, but we're counting on you to fix bigger problems. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you. I might just come back and sit here and do public comment just to make sure you get it right. So I have shorter minutes to read when I get on there. So well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I didn't really know in the last 6 months, how I would feel tonight, because it's just been a long road, particularly those of us who've been here 6 years. And sorry, Commissioner Templeton had to leave. And I really have to say it's decidedly mixed. And I particularly appreciate, no reflection on anyone in the past, but I particularly appreciate this commission. So I'm glad this is the last one that I sat on the way there. I really appreciate the camaraderie and the work ethic, and how we really work to get sensible solutions, which is a phrase I used in the campaign quite a lot. And I think we're really aligned in doing that. And that it's all about the citizens at all times. And I think we're able to move some things along here that sometimes changed what council was able to do, sometimes didn't. But I really think it's been a great experience in the last 12 months for myself, and certainly in the last long 6 years. It's changed a lot since Vice Chair Suma and I stepped onto this commission 6 years ago, in terms of the personnel and sort of the systems and the procedures and so on. But I just feel very proud that we've been so productive in the last couple of years, particularly, and hopefully in the last 6. So, thank you very much. I'm going to officially adjourn. Oh, sorry. Hold that thought.
Go Vice Chair Suma's comments. I'm a short timer compared to you two. But during the 3 years I've been here, it's been a real pleasure to work with you, and I've appreciated your balanced approach and your ability your desire and effort to sort of find consensus in that balance. And I'm, trusting that we're going to see more of that at the council. I do have some procedural things that I want to get an understanding of. When we come back together at our first meeting in January, we won't have our chair. We will have our vice chair. And so I wanted to find out who has incidentally ably served as the acting chair on a couple items where Chair Lowing had to step off due to his election. And so I wanted to find out from Mr. Yang if we have a process to elevate the vice chair to the chair when the chair departs. And if so, do we need a process to elect, I guess, a short-term vice chair? Because I do think, we've seen it happen here in the last couple of months. It's important to have the vice chair in the situation where the chair isn't available. So do we need a vice chair to carry us to our next election of a chair and vice chair, which I would think wouldn't happen under this new schedule until we have new planning commissioner appointments. So I don't know that we necessarily need answers to those tonight, but I hope that on our agenda for our first meeting in January that we'll be advised and take whatever action we need to have the leadership in place.
Councilor Yang?
Yeah, I guess I'll just say that the vice chair will step into the chair's role, and then there's not a process spelled out specifically for another election to take place to select a vice chair, but the chair, in this case, I guess that the acting chair does have the ability to designate someone, but we'll look into that further as well, and be ready to address it at the first meeting of the new year.
One thing that I recall that we made a change. We made a change on this commission to our bylaws to move to a January election before all of our terms were extended. And the objective there was that we wanted new commissioners to have a voice in the new chair. So one thing that Mr. Yang, you should also take a look at is moving that January date probably to March or April to accommodate the new people that were coming on who would want to vote for the next full year's chair and vice chair. It'd be a simple change to the bylaws, but it also needs some attention. Because the delay changes things a lot in terms of getting people in place. But we would want to stay true to the fact that we want the new commissioners to vote for new leadership. That was a real important change that we made. Anything else? I'm leaving. Thank you very much. This meeting's adjourned and Chair Lowing's out.